Alright, so this is part 2 of section 9.1. This is titled Perfect Squares. For this one, we're going to simplify radicals that are not perfect. So for example, a perfect square gives you has a square root that's a whole number. For example, square root of 4 is 2. Something that's not perfect is going to give you a decimal when you take the square root. So we're working with numbers that are not perfect, and we're trying to simplify them without giving answers as decimals. So in example 1, I have the square root of 8, and so the first thing you want to do is you want to find the largest perfect square factor of 8, and then we're going to write that one first. So here's my list of perfect squares. 1 factors of 8, so 4 works. 4 is in my list. 4 times 2 would give me 8, so I'm going to use 4. I'm going to write that one first. So square root of 4 times square root of 2. That still gives me 8. I haven't changed anything. But now I know that since 4 is perfect, it's going to give me a whole number. The square root of 4 is 2. So this gives me 2. The square root of 2 is not perfect. It's not on my list. There's blue numbers. So then it has to stay inside the radical. And that's my answer. So just make sure you're always finding the largest perfect square factor, or it won't work. It won't be fully simplified. So let's see another one that's pretty easy. Example 2. I have the square root of 27, so I'm doing the same thing. I'm finding 2 factors, but at least one of them has to be from my list. And so 9 would work. So I'm going to take 9 times 3, because that gives me 27. So I'm going to do square root of 9 first, because it's the perfect one, times square root of 3. Square root of 9 is perfect. That gives me 3. Square root of 3. 3 is not on my list. That means it's not perfect. So it stays inside the radical. And that's my answer. Okay, so let's see numbers where they get a little bit bigger. So now I have 72, and I have to find factors of 72, and you always have to start with the biggest factor. So if you have a hard time determining which factors to use, then you can always check your list. So I'm going to start with the biggest number without going over 72. So that would be 64. And I'm just going to check on my calculator to see if it works. So I'm going to do 72 divided by 64. That gives me a decimal, so it doesn't work. So I'm going to move up my list to 49. 72 divided by 49. Decimal doesn't work. So I'm going to move up my list. Now it's 36. 72 divided by 36. That works because it gives me a whole number. It gives me 2. So I'm going to take 36 from my list times 2, because it gives me 72. And then same thing, square root of 36 is 6. And then the square root of 2 is not perfect, so it stays. Okay. So same thing, example 4. If you don't know what 2 factors to use, again, you would start with 81, because it's the largest factor without going over, and then you start checking them going up, so that you make sure you get the biggest factor once you find it. So for this one, the factor that works is 49. So I'm going to do 49 times 2, that gives me 98. Square root of 49 is 7, and then the square root of 2 stays. So they're pretty easy. And one more example, just because this one looks a little bit different from the rest. On example 5, I have a number that's outside of my radical, and so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep that number, and then I'm going to worry about it to the end. So I'm going to keep that 2, and I'm going to simplify square root of 27 just like I did on example 2. I already know 9 and 3 work. So 9 times 3. So again, that 2, I'm just keeping that 2. Square root of 9 gives me 3. Square root of 3 is not perfect, so it stays. And so for my final answer, I just have to multiply the 2 numbers that are outside. So 2 times 3, that gives me 6. And then the square root of 3 stays.